Rain hammered the empty road as a black Mercedes S-Class rolled slowly past the gas station at the edge of Fresno. Inside the car, billionaire Richard Haynes was reviewing notes on his iPad, barely looking up until something strange cut through the blur of water on the windshield. A small figure stood by the bus stop, soaked to the bone, clutching two toddlers to her chest as if her thin arms were the only shield they had left. The streetlight flickered, revealing a girl no older than 12, shivering barefoot and trying to keep the two little ones warm with her own drenched hoodie. Richard blinked, leaned forward, and quietly told his driver to stop. Something in the girl's eyes, fear mixed with a kind of quiet determination, hit him harder than he expected. He stepped out into the rain, his expensive suit instantly soaked, but he didn't seem to care. The girl froze when she saw him approach, tightening her grip on the toddlers as if expecting someone to take them away. He spoke gently. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" The girl didn't answer. Her lips trembled, not just from the cold, but from something deeper, something she had been holding together for far too long. The toddlers whimpered, burying their faces into her neck. Richard lowered himself to her eye level. "It's okay. You're safe. Tell me what happened." She hesitated, eyes darting toward the dark road behind her, as if someone might appear at any moment. Every second she stayed silent seemed to carry the weight of a secret too heavy for someone her age. After what felt like a full minute, she whispered, We can't go home anymore." The rain seemed to fall heavier after those words. Richard felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Something in her tone told him this wasn't just a child's fear. It was survival. And then, before he could say anything else, the girl looked past him, her face suddenly pale with dread. She felt the danger rising fast. Someone was coming toward them through the rain. Emily had never meant to end up on that rainy roadside, holding her baby twin brothers with no place to go. Hours earlier, everything in her life had collapsed in a way she couldn't control. Her mother, Hannah, had collapsed in their kitchen while packing lunches, clutching her chest in pain. Emily had been the one to call 911, her hands shaking as she tried to keep her brothers calm. At only 12, she had learned how to be the strong one because no one else would. The ambulance took her mother to the county hospital, leaving Emily with a promise that someone from social services would arrive soon. But instead of help, trouble came first. Their landlord, Marjorie, showed up pounding on the door, demanding the rent Hannah had fallen behind on. Emily tried to explain what had happened, but the woman's face twisted with irritation rather than sympathy. She didn't care about sickness or children. She cared only about the money she claimed she was owed. When Emily begged for one more day, Marjorie snapped that she was done with excuses and wanted them gone by sundown. Lucas, her 18-year-old son, stood behind her smirking, enjoying every second of Emily's fear. Emily gathered diapers, bottles, and the twins' blankets into a worn backpack, knowing she had no one to call. Her mother had worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. There were no relatives, no neighbors close enough to trust. She locked the door to their apartment for the last time, her hands trembling as she whispered to the babies that everything would be okay, even though she didn't believe it. She walked for miles under the storm, but the rain became too heavy, and the babies cried from the cold. That was when she stopped under the bus shelter, hugging them against her chest, praying for a miracle she didn't expect to come. And then she saw a shadow moving through the rain toward her, the same shadow she feared she had escaped earlier, now closing in again. It was the last person she hoped to avoid. Richard didn't recognize the fear in Emily's eyes until he turned and saw where she was looking. In the distance, beneath the broken street lamp, Marjorie's old Toyota crept toward the bus stop, its headlights cutting through the rain like 2 angry eyes. Emily's breath hitched. She clutched the twins tighter as if the car alone could hurt them. Richard stepped slightly in front of her without thinking, creating a small barrier between her and whatever had traumatized her so deeply. Before the car reached them, it slowed, then backed away, turning down a side street. Emily exhaled shakily, but the fear didn't leave her face. Richard could see she was trying to stay calm for the babies, even though her own world had clearly been falling apart long before tonight. "Let's get you out of the rain," he said softly. He guided her toward the Mercedes, opening the back door so she could settle the twins inside. The warm air and soft leather felt like another universe compared to the cold, punishing street she'd been standing on. Emily hesitated, her eyes darting between the luxury interior and the storm behind her. She wasn't used to anything gentle. Inside the car, she sat stiffly, afraid to touch anything. She watched the windshield wipers sweep away the rain as if they were erasing the life she had known. Richard asked where she lived, and she pointed toward a rundown complex several blocks away, a building he had driven past many times without noticing. He made a quiet decision to see it for himself. When they arrived, he stepped out first, stunned at the sight before him. The walls were cracked, the windows patched with cardboard, and a soaked eviction notice clung to the door like a cruel stamp of judgment. Emily's voice trembled as she whispered, "This is all we had." Richard felt something heavy settle in his chest. The contrast between his world and hers had never felt sharper. The tension rose sharply inside. Then, from the stairwell above, a harsh voice echoed down toward them. Someone else had discovered their return. Lucas's voice thudded down the stairwell before he even appeared. "I knew you'd crawl back," he sneered, stepping into the dim light with his hood up and a half-crushed energy drink in his hand. Rainwater dripped from the broken gutter above him, splashing onto the concrete. Emily stiffened, instinctively shielding the twins. Richard watched the boy closely, picking up instantly on the hostility in his posture. Lucas wasn't just a bully, he enjoyed the power he held over someone smaller. "So this is the creep helping you now?" Lucas scoffed, eyeing Richard's soaked dress shoes and expensive watch with the mocking grin of someone who had nothing to lose. "What's wrong, princess? Can't handle real life, so you go crying to rich strangers?" Emily shrank back, her shoulders curling protectively around the babies. Richard didn't move at first. He simply observed the dynamic, the imbalance, the sheer disrespect. Something inside him tightened. He had dealt with boardrooms full of egos, but there was something uglier here. Someone attacking a child because he could. He stepped forward, calm but firm. "You need to back away." Lucas laughed, a sharp, grating sound. "Or what? You gonna buy the building and kick us out? People like you think money solves everything." Richard kept his voice steady. "No, but decency might." The boy's smirk faltered for a second, then twisted back into anger. "Your mom trashed the place and didn't pay a dime," he spat toward Emily. "You think anyone cares what happens to you?" Emily's eyes filled, but she held her chin up just enough for Richard to notice. That tiny act of courage hit him harder than he expected. Before he could speak again, Marjorie's voice screeched from above. She stepped into view, curlers still in her hair, pointing at Emily like she was pointing at a stain. "You have 10 seconds to get off my property before I call the cops and say you broke in." Richard's expression darkened. He'd seen ruthless people in business, but this felt different. Crueler, pettier, targeting children who had nothing. He opened his mouth to respond, but Marjorie cut him off with a scream, because she had finally realized who she was yelling at, and her reaction changed everything. For a full second, Marjorie just stared at Richard, squinting through the rain as if her eyes refused to believe what they were seeing. Then her jaw dropped. She recognized him, not from a personal encounter, but from a framed magazine cover hanging inside the lobby of the local bank. Richard Haynes, the tech billionaire who'd funded a new STEM program for underprivileged kids. The man whose face sometimes appeared on business news playing on the waiting room TV. A man far beyond her league. Her expression changed instantly, anger melting into a desperate, sticky sweetness. She stumbled down the stairs, nearly slipping on the wet concrete as she forced out a fake laugh. "Oh my God, Mr. Haynes, I didn't realize it was you. What an honor, such an honor, actually." She grabbed his arm, ignoring the shock on Emily's face. "If I had known the girl was with you, of course we wouldn't have rushed the eviction. Kids exaggerate. You know how dramatic they can be." Emily's lips parted in disbelief. Lucas looked just as stunned, but for a different reason. His mother never backed down for anyone, ever. Richard pulled his arm away, polite but firm. "Your treatment of this family is unacceptable. Marjorie's smile cracked. No, sir, you're misunderstanding. Her mother owes back rent and the girl was, well, she was making a scene. These tenants attract trouble, you know. I was simply protecting my property. Emily's face flushed with humiliation. She shook her head, but Marjorie talked over her. You should have seen her earlier. Shouting, refusing to leave, acting like she owns the place. Honestly, I've never seen such disrespect. That's not true, Emily whispered, voice trembling. I never yelled. I only asked for time. Marjorie spun toward her, venom slipping through her polite mask. Don't you talk back to me, little... Richard stepped between them. Enough. But Marjorie wasn't done. Her humiliation was boiling into rage, and she suddenly raised her voice loud enough for neighbors peeking from windows to hear. She's lying to you. These kids are trouble leeches. The mother is irresponsible, the girl is manipulative, and they're the reason this building is falling apart. Emily froze as the words sliced through her, echoing across the courtyard. And just when the cruelty reached its peak, Richard turned slowly toward Marjorie, ready to say something that would stun everyone watching. Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The quiet way he looked at Marjorie, steady, unimpressed, and deeply disappointed, was enough to make her falter. Rain pattered against the cracked pavement as neighbors leaned farther out their windows, sensing something big was about to happen. Emily stood frozen behind him, the twins clinging to her shirt. Do you know what I see? Richard said finally, his tone calm but cutting. I see a child trying harder than most adults I've met, and I see someone who thinks cruelty is a form of authority. Marjorie's smile crumbled. Mr. Haynes, I didn't mean... Yes, you did, he interrupted softly. You meant every word. Lucas shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence dissolving under the weight of the moment. Emily held her breath, trying to understand why this powerful man was defending her, someone he'd met less than an hour ago. Richard turned slightly, looking at Emily. Is this how she's treated you? And your mother? Emily swallowed hard. She wanted to stay quiet, but something inside her, maybe exhaustion, maybe courage, made her nod. She always speaks to us like we're not people. The statement hung in the air. Marjorie exploded. Oh, please, she's lying again. You're falling for her pity act, but she's been nothing but trouble since the first day they moved in. Richard held up a hand. Enough. I'm done listening to you insult a child to protect your own ego. The courtyard went silent. Marjorie's face twitched with humiliation, but she still tried to claw back control. You can't talk to me like that. This is my building. Richard took a slow step toward her. Not anymore. The words hit harder than a shout. Even Lucas recoiled. Emily blinked, confused. What? What do you mean? Marjorie whispered. Richard's expression didn't change. I'll buy it. Marjorie choked on a laugh. You can't just... I can, he said calmly, and I will. Gasps echoed through the courtyard. Emily felt her knees weaken, not from fear this time, but from shock. Marjorie's face went pale, because Richard wasn't bluffing, and the next words out of his mouth would shatter her last bit of power. For a moment, the rain seemed to pause. Even the twins quieted, sensing the tension hanging in the courtyard. Marjorie stared at Richard as if he had spoken a foreign language. Buying the building wasn't just unexpected, it was impossible for her to process. She sputtered, You can't just walk in here and say things like that. This is my livelihood. Richard looked completely unbothered. Your livelihood should not depend on terrorizing children. Neighbors whispered behind their curtains. Lucas shifted his weight, suddenly unsure where to stand next to his mother or as far away as possible. Emily felt her chest tighten. She didn't want chaos. She didn't want revenge. She just wanted safety for her brothers and her mother. She tugged lightly on Richard's sleeve. Please, you don't have to do all this for us. Richard knelt slightly so he could meet her eyes. Emily, you deserve to be treated with dignity. No child should be spoken to the way she spoke to you. Marjorie finally snapped. Oh, stop pretending she's some innocent angel. She and her mother have been nothing but burdens. They bring noise, mess, drama. Emily's voice, small but steady, cut through her rant. We're not a burden. We're a family trying to survive. That sentence echoed louder than any shout. Richard stood again, his expression firm. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, turning to Marjorie. "You will pack your records and belongings. I'm purchasing this property today. My team will handle the transfer." "You can't kick me out," she shrieked. "I'm not kicking you out," Richard replied calmly. "I'm removing your power to hurt them." Marjorie's face twisted in rage, but before she could spit out another insult, Richard delivered the line that froze her completely. "I'd rather bulldoze this place than let you speak to her again." Lucas's mouth fell open. Emily's breath caught. The courtyard went dead silent. Marjorie stood trembling, not from cold, but from the realization that she had finally met someone she couldn't bully. And just as the weight of his words settled, the front gate clanged open behind them. A stranger rushed in with news that would shake Emily's world even deeper. The gate slammed so hard it echoed through the courtyard. Everyone turned. A hospital security officer jogged toward them, rain streaking down his uniform. He held a clipboard against his chest and scanned the group anxiously until his eyes landed on Emily. "Are you Emily Carter?" he asked, breathless. Emily froze. Yes. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I've been looking for you. Your mother. Something happened. They need you at the hospital right away." The words punched the air out of her lungs. She swayed, clutching the twins as panic flooded her face. "Is she okay? Did she wake up? Please? Just tell me she's okay." The officer hesitated, and that hesitation made her knees buckle. Richard reacted instantly, steadying her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Let him speak," he said softly. The officer exhaled. "She's alive, but her condition got worse. She asked for you before she went into emergency surgery. They couldn't reach you, so the nurse sent me to find you." Emily's breath shook violently. Rain mixed with tears on her cheeks. "I should have stayed with her. I shouldn't have left." Richard knelt beside her. "You didn't leave her. You were forced out of your home. None of this is your fault." Behind them, Marjorie muttered something under her breath about dramatics, earning a sharp glare from Lucas. But for once, he stayed silent. Emily looked down at her brothers, both now whimpering softly from the tension. "I need to go," she whispered, "but I don't know how to get there. And I can't take them inside the emergency room." "You will," Richard said. "You're not doing this alone." Before she could respond, his driver pulled up the Mercedes again, headlights glowing through the rain. The warm interior waited like a lifeline. "We're going to the hospital," Richard told the officer. "Stay with us until we get inside." The officer nodded. Emily hugged the twins tighter, trying to stay strong, but her voice trembled when she asked Richard the question she feared most. What if she doesn't make it?" Richard looked at her with a steady, almost fatherly compassion. But before he could answer, her phone buzzed with a call that made her go pale. Emily's old cracked iPhone buzzed inside the backpack she used as a diaper bag. The screen flickered from the rainwater as she pulled it out with trembling hands. Unknown number. Her stomach tightened. She swallowed hard and pressed accept. Hello?" A woman's voice rushed through the line, tight, frantic, the kind that only comes from hospitals in the middle of the night. "Is this Emily Carter? This is Nurse Thompson from Fresno County Medical. Your mother was taken into surgery 20 minutes ago. We're trying to stabilize her blood pressure, but she asked repeatedly if her children were safe. She seemed extremely distressed." Emily's lips trembled. "I'm coming now. I'm on my way." The nurse hesitated, and that silence carried a weight no 12-year-old should have to hear. "Emily, your mother also said something we need to discuss when you arrive. Something about guardianship." Emily's breath caught. "Guardianship? But I'm here. I'm with my brothers." Richard leaned closer, hearing enough to understand the severity. He gently touched her back in reassurance. The nurse continued, choosing her words carefully. "Your mother signed a temporary emergency form just in case. She listed someone named Linda Carter as the children's fallback guardian. Do you know who that is?" Emily nearly dropped the phone. Her voice came out in a whisper. "No, I don't. I've never heard that name." The nurse inhaled sharply. "Then we need to speak in person. Please hurry." Emily ended the call with shaky fingers. Guardianship, a name she didn't know, a signature her mother must have made while terrified and alone. Her heart hammered as she turned to Richard. "What if they take my brothers away? What if they think I can't take care of them? They'll separate us. I know they will. Richard crouched to her eye level, rain dripping from his coat onto the pavement. No one is separating you, he said firmly. Not while I'm here. But Emily was already spiraling, fear rising too fast to control. She gripped the strap of her backpack as if it were the only anchor she had left. The hospital officer stepped forward. We need to go now. The surgeon asked for an update as soon as you arrive. Emily nodded, breath shallow. They turned toward the Mercedes, and suddenly, someone stepped out from behind the neighboring building, blocking their path. A figure stepped out from behind the neighboring building, blocking their path like a shadow that didn't belong to the rain-soaked night. Emily froze instantly. Richard's driver reached for the car door, but stopped when the man lifted one hand, not threatening but desperate. Emily, the man said, breath trembling. Emily Carter. She clutched her brothers tighter. Who are you? He stepped closer into the glow of the street lamp. He looked about 40, dressed in a worn flannel jacket soaked through from the storm. His jaw was lined with stubble, and his eyes held something that made Richard instinctively tense: regret, fear, and recognition. My name is Daniel, he said quietly. Daniel Carter. Emily shook her head. I don't know you. The man swallowed. You wouldn't. Your mom. She never told you about me. Richard moved in front of Emily by instinct, his protective intuition immediate. State your business, he said, tone firm. Daniel looked at Richard, then back at Emily. I'm your uncle. The world seemed to tilt under Emily's feet. That's not possible. I don't have any family. He nodded slowly. You do, and I've been trying to reach your mother for months. When the hospital couldn't get a hold of her emergency contacts tonight, they called me. I came straight here. Emily shook her head harder. Why now? Why show up when everything is falling apart? Daniel's expression cracked. Because your mother listed me under guardianship forms years ago. Long before things got bad, I didn't know she was in the hospital until tonight. Those words hit her like a cold wave. Guardianship, the unknown name on the form. Richard studied him sharply. If you're here to take these children, you need to understand something. They're terrified. You will not force anything tonight. Daniel raised his hands, palms out, voice soft. I'm not here to take them. I just want to help. I'm their blood. And I think Hannah wanted me to be here in case she couldn't be. Emily's breath fractured. The twins whimpered, sensing her panic. Daniel stepped closer, eyes pleading. I'm not your enemy, Emily. But before she could answer, her phone buzzed again. The hospital was calling with an update she wasn't ready to hear. Emily's hands shook violently as she answered the call. Rain dripped down her forehead, mixing with tears she didn't even realize were falling. Richard stayed close, steady as a wall. Daniel hovered several feet back, unsure whether to approach or keep his distance. Hello? Emily whispered. Emily, it's Nurse Thompson, the voice said, softer this time. Your mother just came out of surgery. Emily's breath caught. Is she okay? There was a pause. The kind of pause that steals the ground from beneath a child's feet. She's stable, the nurse finally said, but she's not waking up yet. Her heart stopped twice during the procedure. The doctors are doing everything they can, but she's extremely weak. The world around Emily warped. The courtyard blurred, her knees almost buckled, but Richard caught her before she fell. The nurse continued, We need you here as soon as possible. And Emily, your mother repeated something before she went under. She said, Don't let them separate my kids. She said it over and over. Emily clutched the phone so tightly her knuckles whitened. No one is taking us away. No one. We'll talk when you arrive, the nurse said gently. Be safe getting here. The call ended. Emily lowered the phone slowly, her breathing quick and shallow. The twins began to cry, sensing her panic. Daniel stepped forward, voice trembling. Emily, I swear I'm not here to hurt you or your brothers. I just want... Stop, she said sharply, surprising even herself. I don't know you. I don't trust you. I don't have space for anything else right now. Daniel's eyes filled with something heavy. Guilt, maybe grief. Your mother pushed me away years ago. I thought giving her space was the right thing. I didn't know how bad things had gotten. Emily wiped her face with her sleeve, shaking her head. Why didn't she tell me about you? Daniel swallowed painfully. Because she was afraid you'd think she'd failed you. Lightning cracked in the distance. The tension in the courtyard thickened again. Richard gently touched Emily's shoulder. "We need to get you to the hospital." They turned toward the car, only for Lucas to step in their path again, appearing out of nowhere. And this time, he wasn't alone. Lucas stepped forward, but it wasn't his presence that made Emily's heart stutter. It was the two older teens behind him. Boys from the neighborhood, both bigger, both carrying the same reckless swagger that came from having too much free time and too little guidance. One cracked his knuckles. The other spit rainwater from his mouth and grinned. Richard instinctively shifted his stance, guiding Emily and the babies behind him. Daniel moved closer too, protective instincts overriding hesitation. Even the hospital officer stiffened, one hand drifting toward his radio. "What are you doing?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. Lucas shrugged, pretending this was nothing. "Relax. Just making sure this billionaire doesn't steal our building. My mom's freaking out upstairs. Says this guy's gonna ruin everything." Richard didn't blink. "Your mother ruined everything the moment she decided her power mattered more than human decency." The older boy snorted. "Man talks fancy." Richard ignored him. He was focused on Lucas, whose fake bravado was starting to crack around the edges. Lucas wasn't evil. He was scared, desperate to look powerful in front of the only people who ever treated him like he mattered. Daniel stepped forward. "Move aside. A child needs to get to the hospital." Lucas flinched, but the tall boy behind him shoved his shoulder. "Don't punk out, man." Emily hugged the twins closer. Their soft cries echoed through the courtyard like tiny alarm bells. "Please," she said, voice cracking. "My mom could die. Just let us go." For the first time, Lucas's eyes softened. But then he looked back at the boys behind him, swallowing hard. Pressure. Pride. Poor choices mixing with fear. He stepped in front of the Mercedes door. "No one's going anywhere until we talk." Richard's jaw tensed. "We're leaving." The tall boy shoved Richard's shoulder. It wasn't enough to hurt him, but enough to ignite a dangerous spark. Daniel lunged forward, grabbing the boy's wrist. "Back off!" Suddenly, all three boys squared up. The tension exploded into chaos. Voices shouting, the twins wailing, rain pounding against metal and skin. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, terrified. And then a blinding set of headlights swept into the courtyard, forcing everyone to freeze. The headlights were so bright they cut through the rain like a blade. All the boys flinched, shielding their eyes. The Mercedes engine hummed behind Emily, but this new vehicle had a sharper, more official growl. Gravel crunched as it rolled to a stop. Then the door flew open. A tall woman in a dark coat stepped out, holding a badge in one hand and an umbrella in the other. Her posture alone carried authority. Even before she spoke, the whole courtyard seemed to shrink. "I'm Officer Ramirez, Fresno PD," she announced, voice firm, controlled. "We got reports of minors in distress and a possible assault. Everyone stay exactly where you are." Lucas went pale. The older boys staggered back, suddenly realizing this wasn't a game. One mumbled, "We didn't touch nobody," but his voice shook so badly it barely counted as a sentence. Officer Ramirez scanned the scene with sharp, swift precision. 3 frightened kids, a billionaire drenched in rain, an exhausted 12-year-old clutching 2 crying toddlers, a frantic hospital officer, and 3 teenage boys trying to look braver than they felt. Her eyes locked on Emily. "Sweetheart, are you hurt?" Emily shook her head, but the tremble in her voice betrayed her fear. No, they just wouldn't let us leave." That was all Ramirez needed. She turned toward the boys, her tone switching from gentle to steel. "Step away. Hands where I can see them." Lucas obeyed immediately, swallowing hard. The 2 older boys hesitated, but one glare from Ramirez broke whatever bravado they had left. They backed up with their hands raised, muttering curses under their breath. Then Marjorie appeared at the top of the stairs, screeching, "Officer, arrest them! They're trespassing!" But Ramirez cut her off sharply. "Ma'am, one more word out of you without me asking, and you'll spend the night in the car instead of them." Marjorie's mouth snapped shut. Richard stepped forward, calm but authoritative. "Officer, this girl needs to get to the hospital. Her mother is in critical condition." Ramirez softened her tone again. "Understood. I'll escort you there myself." Emily exhaled shakily, relief almost buckling her knees. For the first time that night, help felt real. But as they moved toward the car, Ramirez paused, turning sharply toward Daniel. "Sir," she said, narrowing her eyes, "I need to verify your story." And in that instant, Daniel's expression gave away something that changed the entire mood. Officer Ramirez stepped closer to Daniel, her flashlight beam cutting across his face. Rain dripped from his hair, but it wasn't the storm that made him look shaken. It was the question he knew was coming. "Sir," Ramirez repeated, firm but controlled, "you said your name is Daniel Carter and that you're this child's uncle. I need ID." Daniel swallowed hard. I don't have it on me. I left in a hurry when the hospital called." Ramirez didn't blink. "Then tell me your address." He hesitated. Too long. Richard noticed it immediately. Emily did too. Her heartbeat kicked up, panic twisting in her stomach. I've been living between places," Daniel finally said. "I lost my apartment last month. I was staying with a friend outside Bakersfield." Ramirez's brows lifted slightly. "Name of the friend?" Another long hesitation. Daniel opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Ramirez exhaled sharply. "That's not good enough." Emily felt her chest tighten. "Why are you lying?" she asked, voice trembling but louder than she expected. "If you're really my uncle, why can't you answer anything?" Daniel looked at her with eyes full of pain. "Because I'm not lying about that," he said softly. "I am your uncle, but I'm not proud of the life I've lived. I didn't want the first impression you have of me to be this." The rain hammered harder, like the sky was straining to listen. Richard stepped slightly in front of Emily. "What exactly are you hiding?" Daniel lowered his gaze. "I have a record," he admitted. "Petty stuff, DUIs, missed court dates. I wasn't stable enough to help your mom when she needed me. That's why she kept me away from you. But I swear to you, I never stopped caring. I'm trying to fix my life." Officer Ramirez studied him, weighing every word. Emily stared at him, her heart torn. Part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her was terrified to. Ramirez spoke again, steady and stern. "Sir, until we verify your identity, you can't leave." Daniel nodded, accepting it without a fight. "I'm not going anywhere. She's my family." Emily felt a heavy ache form in her chest. But before anyone could respond, Ramirez's radio crackled with an urgent message, and the words coming through it made Emily's face drain of all color. Officer Ramirez pressed the radio against her shoulder, turning slightly away from the group. The static crackled through the rain before a voice came through. Urgent, clipped, the tone of someone delivering news they didn't want to say out loud. "Ramirez, this is County Medical. We have an update on patient Hannah Carter. Her condition has deteriorated. The daughter needs to arrive immediately. Repeat, immediately." Emily felt the world tilt. Her hands went cold. The twins squirmed anxiously in her arms, but she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It was like her heart had forgotten how. Ramirez turned back to her, expression softening. "We need to go, right now." Those words triggered something inside Emily. Fear, desperation, and a tiny surge of courage all tangled together. "Please," she whispered, "take me to her." Richard placed a steady hand between her shoulder blades. "I'm right behind you," he said, voice quiet but certain. They all moved toward the Mercedes, but Daniel called out, "Wait, please, let me come. She's my sister." Ramirez shook her head. "You're not cleared yet." Daniel's face crumpled. "I'm family. She'd want me there." Emily hesitated. She didn't trust him, not yet, but she couldn't deny the pain in his voice. It echoed her own. Richard leaned to her level. "It's your call," he said gently. "Do you want him with us?" Emily looked at Daniel, soaked, shaking, trying to hide the guilt weighing down his shoulders. She swallowed hard. "You can come, but you don't touch my brothers, and you don't lie to me again." Daniel nodded, eyes glassy. "I won't." Ramirez sighed. "Fine. You ride in the police unit behind us. You step 1 foot out before I tell you, and the cuffs go on. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," he said. They loaded into the Mercedes. Richard's driver pulled forward. Ramirez returned to her patrol car. Daniel climbed into the back of hers, hands trembling as he shut the door. As they exited the courtyard, Emily stared out the window, heart pounding in her throat. She whispered to herself, "Hold on, Mom. Please, just hold on." But as they sped through the rain toward the hospital, None of them knew the decision waiting inside would tear the night apart. The hospital doors slid open before the Mercedes even came to a full stop. The lobby lights felt too bright after the storm. White, cold, unforgiving. Emily stepped inside, clutching her brothers, her shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Richard stayed close, protecting her space without crowding it. The hospital officer guided them quickly toward the elevators. When the doors opened on the critical care floor, Nurse Thompson was already waiting. Her face was kind but tight with urgency. "Emily, come with me. Your mother is still unconscious, but the doctor needs to speak with you." Emily's voice cracked. Is she dying?" The nurse hesitated. Too long again. "She's fighting," she said gently, "but we're running out of time to make certain decisions." Emily's knees weakened, but Richard steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. "We're here," he murmured. They followed the nurse into a small consultation room. The doctor, a calm woman with tired eyes, stood beside a clipboard. She looked at Emily and her expression softened immediately. "I'm Dr. Patel. Emily, your mother's heart is very weak. We've done everything possible, but she may not wake up tonight." Emily tightened her grip on the twins as if she could protect them from the truth. Dr. Patel knelt to Emily's level. "Before she went into surgery, your mother signed a directive. If her condition worsened, she wanted someone she trusted to make decisions for you and your brothers. That's why she listed a guardian." Emily swallowed hard. She wrote a name. "Someone called Linda. We don't know who that is." Dr. Patel nodded. "Linda Carter, your mother's cousin. She lives in Oregon. The hospital contacted her tonight." Emily felt the blood drain from her face. No. She can't take us. She doesn't even know us." The doctor's voice was gentle but firm. "If your mother doesn't wake soon, state law requires we consider the listed guardian." Emily shook her head violently. "I won't go with her. I won't let anyone take my brothers." Richard stepped forward, calm but authoritative. "Doctor, there must be another option." Dr. Patel looked between them. "There is," she said quietly, "but it requires a legal statement from an adult willing to assume responsibility." Emily's breath caught, because she knew exactly who the doctor was looking at. Richard didn't speak right away. He stood completely still, the weight of Dr. Patel's words settling over him like another layer of rain. Emily stared at him, her eyes wide, frightened, hopeful, and far too grown for a 12-year-old. The twins whimpered softly in her arms, unaware that their future hung in the silence between two adults. Dr. Patel folded her hands. "Mr. Haynes, California law allows a temporary guardianship agreement if a responsible adult volunteers. It would keep the children together until the mother wakes or a court can review the case." Emily's voice trembled. "Please, don't let them take us. We're all we have." Richard slowly lowered himself to one knee so he could meet her eyes. "Emily, this is a big responsibility. It means you and your brothers would come with me. Live under my care, not just tonight, but until your mother recovers." Emily's breath shook. "I'll do anything. I'll help with the twins. I'll stay out of the way. I won't cause trouble. Just don't let them take us from each other." Something in Richard's chest tightened painfully. He'd spent his entire adult life building companies, writing checks, solving problems money could fix. But this trembling child begging not to lose the last pieces of her world was something else entirely, something that no amount of wealth had ever prepared him for. Before he could respond, the door opened and Daniel stepped inside, escorted by Officer Ramirez. His face was pale, eyes red. "If someone needs to take responsibility," he said hoarsely, "it should be family. Let me do it." Emily shook her head instantly. "No, not until I know who you are. Not until I know why you left." Daniel's shoulders collapsed a little. Ramirez watched him closely, ready to intervene. Richard exhaled slowly, then stood. "Doctor, prepare the paperwork." Emily gasped. Daniel closed his eyes. Ramirez stiffened in surprise. Richard placed a gentle hand on Emily's back. "I'm not replacing your mother," he said softly. "I'm just keeping my promise to protect you until she can." Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks. Relief, fear, gratitude, all tangled. But before anyone could speak again, a nurse burst into the room, breathless. "She's waking up." Emily didn't even feel her legs move. One moment she was standing in the consultation room. The next she was sprinting down the hallway, clutching the twins as Richard and the others hurried behind her. The nurse led them to room 412, where machines beeped steadily and the smell of antiseptic filled the air. Her mother lay pale against the white sheets, oxygen tubes in place, eyes barely open but undeniably awake. When she saw Emily step into the doorway, something fragile but fierce flickered across her face. "Baby," Hannah whispered, her voice rasping like it had traveled through miles of pain. Emily rushed forward, careful not to jostle the babies, and pressed her forehead gently to her mother's hand. "Mom, I'm here. The boys are okay. We're all okay." A weak smile touched Hannah's lips as her fingers curled against Emily's cheek. "I was so scared. I thought I wouldn't see you again." Richard stood back, respectful. Watching the reunion with a weight in his chest he couldn't explain. Daniel lingered near the door, guilt and longing twisting inside him as he saw his sister, his only real family, fighting to stay present. Hannah shifted her gaze to Richard. "You're the man who helped them?" Richard nodded softly. "Yes, ma'am." Tears filled her eyes, pooling at the edges. "Thank you for bringing my babies out of that place." Emily's breath caught. She knew her mother didn't have much energy left, but there was something urgent in her eyes, something unfinished. Hannah looked at Daniel next. Her expression softened with sorrow. "You came." Daniel swallowed hard. "I'm sorry for everything." Her eyes flickered with pain, regret, and love she never found the courage to express. "We'll talk. Later. Right now. The kids." Emily's heart thudded. She remembered the guardian paperwork, the unknown name, the looming threat of separation. Hannah squeezed her daughter's hand weakly. "Listen carefully." Everyone in the room leaned in. "I made mistakes, trusting the wrong people. I didn't want you three to end up in the system. That's why I wrote Linda's name. But if I don't get better, there's something I need you to know." Her voice trembled. "I didn't choose the right guardian." Emily's breath froze midair. And then Hannah whispered the name she truly trusted. Hannah's lips trembled as she gathered what little strength she had left. Her voice was barely above a whisper, soft and fragile, but every word carved into the air with impossible weight. "The person I trust, the one I want for my kids." She paused, breath hitching. "It's him, Richard." Emily's eyes widened. Daniel's shoulders slumped as if the last bit of hope inside him crumbled. Even Officer Ramirez straightened, surprised. Richard himself froze, not out of fear, but out of the profound responsibility in her words. Hannah's gaze drifted toward him, glassy but certain. "You didn't know me, but you protected my children like they were yours. You showed them kindness when the world showed them nothing. That's the man I want in their corner." Emily's throat tightened. "Mom, are you sure?" Hannah nodded weakly. "You're just a child, sweetheart. You shouldn't have to raise your brothers alone. And Daniel..." Her eyes softened toward her brother. "I love you. I always will. But you're not ready. Not yet." Daniel blinked rapidly, pain flickering across his face, but he didn't argue. He only lowered his head, accepting the truth he'd avoided for years. Richard stepped closer to the bed, his voice low and steady. "If this is what you want, I'll honor it. I'll keep them safe, all of them." A trembling breath escaped Hannah, half relief, half exhaustion. "Thank you." Emily leaned forward, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You're going to get better, okay? You're coming home. We're all going home." Hannah gave her a faint smile, the kind reserved for moments when a mother wishes she could promise the world but no longer has the strength to. "Maybe. But just in case, I needed you to know." The machines beeped steadily, but her eyelids grew heavy. The nurse stepped in gently. "She needs to rest." Emily didn't want to let go of her hand, but she did, slowly, reluctantly, promising herself she'd hold it again as soon as her mother opened her eyes. As everyone began to step back from the bed, a soft alarm chirped on one of the monitors. The nurse froze, so did Emily. Something was wrong. The soft alarm quickened, rising in tempo. Emily's breath caught as the beeping tightened into a sharp, frightening rhythm. Nurses rushed in, their calm voices suddenly urgent. Hannah's eyelids fluttered, her chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths. "Mom?" Emily whispered, reaching for her hand again. Dr. Patel appeared almost instantly. "She's crashing. Move her to respiratory support now." Emily felt the world slip beneath her feet. Richard pulled her gently back as the medical team surrounded the bed. A nurse lifted the twins from her trembling arms to keep them safe. Emily reached forward, desperate, but Richard held her against his chest. "You're not losing her," he whispered. "She's fighting." Machines beeped faster, voices layered over each other, and then a long, steady tone. "No, no, please!" Emily cried, breaking free, but Officer Ramirez caught her, holding her close as Dr. Patel called for another dose of medication. Then another. And then, miraculously, a beat. Then another. The flatline flickered back into rhythm. Weak, fragile, but alive. The entire room exhaled at once. Dr. Patel straightened, breath shaking. "She's stable again." Emily collapsed into Richard's arms, sobbing with relief. Every ounce of terror she'd been carrying for days poured out in a tide of trembling grief. Richard held her firmly, protectively, as if anchoring her to the ground. When the medical team stepped back, Dr. Patel approached gently. "She's not out of danger yet, but she's here. And she heard you." Emily nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her sleeve. "I'll be here when she wakes up." Later that night, Richard filled out the temporary guardianship papers with steady hands. Emily sat beside him, the twins asleep against her chest, trusting him without question. Daniel watched from the doorway, not angry, just humbled, promising himself he would earn a place in their lives the right way. Officer Ramirez placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "Your family's safe tonight." Emily looked up at Richard, voice soft but full of certainty. "We're not alone anymore." Richard smiled, warm and quiet. "No, you never will be again." Outside the hospital, the storm finally cleared, leaving behind the promise of a new beginning. And for the first time in her life, Emily walked into tomorrow without fear. So that's how the story ends, my wonderful friends. And if you're still here with me right now, still listening, still feeling, then something in this journey must have touched your heart. Maybe it reminded you of your own family, your own struggles, or the people who once showed up for you when life seemed impossible. This story reminds us of a simple but powerful truth. Kindness saves lives. Sometimes the smallest act of courage, like standing up for someone weaker, can change the entire direction of their future. As Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "What we do now echoes in eternity." Richard didn't save Emily because he was rich. He saved her because he chose compassion in a world that often forgets it. And maybe that's the real lesson for us. We can't control the storms life brings, but we can control how we show up, for ourselves and for others. Healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just choosing to keep going, choosing to be gentle, choosing to believe that better days are still possible. If this story touched you in any way, if you felt even one moment of hope or courage, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, not just for us, but so more people out there can feel a little less alone, a little more seen, and maybe a little more healed.